My name is Margaret Wilson, and I'm 68 years old. What happened at my husband's funeral destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. Standing beside Robert's grave on that gray October morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The words on the screen made my blood run cold. I am still alive. Trust no one. My hands shook as I stared at those impossible words. Robert was dead. I had identified his body at the morgue 3 days earlier. I had planned this funeral. I had signed the death certificate. I had watched them lower the casket into the ground. Yet someone was claiming he was alive. "Who is this?" I typed back frantically, my fingers trembling so badly I had to retype the message twice. The response came within seconds. "It's complicated. Watch our daughters carefully. Nothing is what it seems." Our daughters? I looked up from my phone to see Rebecca and Sarah standing by the casket, both dressed in elegant black designer dresses that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Rebecca, 38, was dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed silk tissue, though I noticed her tears seemed rehearsed, theatrical. Sarah, 35, stood rigid beside her husband Marcus, checking her phone every few seconds with what looked like nervous anticipation rather than grief. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing something, then deleting it, then typing again. The autumn wind picked up, scattering leaves across the freshly dug grave. I pulled my worn black coat tighter around my shoulders, the same coat I'd worn to my mother's funeral 15 years ago. I couldn't afford a new one, and honestly, I'd never cared much about fashion. Robert and I had always prioritized saving money over appearances, much to our daughter's apparent embarrassment. For 45 years, Robert had been my everything. We met when I was 23, both of us working at Henderson Textile Factory in the small town of Millbrook, population 8,000. He operated the heavy machinery on the factory floor, while I worked quality control in the finishing department, inspecting fabrics under bright fluorescent lights that hurt my eyes by the end of each 12-hour shift. I still remember our first conversation with perfect clarity. It was during a lunch break on a sweltering July afternoon when the factory's air conditioning had broken down for the third time that summer. I was sitting alone under the massive oak tree behind the factory, eating a peanut butter sandwich my mother had packed for me that morning. Robert approached me with a shy smile, his work shirt soaked with sweat, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. "This heat is unbearable," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead with a blue bandana he kept in his back pocket. "Mind if I share the shade? All the other spots are taken." "Of course," I replied, moving my lunch bag to make room for him on the grass. Though I'm not sure this counts as shade anymore. The sun's moved. He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made something flutter in my chest. "Well, the company's better here anyway." That simple question, that ordinary moment of shared discomfort in the July heat, led to daily lunch meetings under that oak tree. Within 2 weeks, we were taking walks after our shifts ended, strolling through downtown Millbrook's main street, window shopping at stores we couldn't afford, dreaming about futures that seemed impossibly far away. Within a month, Robert asked me to the county fair. Within 3 months, we were officially dating. Within 8 months, he proposed to me in that same spot under the oak tree, getting down on one knee in the dirt with a simple gold band he'd saved 3 months of paychecks to buy. We married in a small ceremony at Millbrook Community Church, with just 20 guests. My mother cried through the entire service. Robert's father, a quiet man who worked at the same factory, gave us an envelope with $300 inside and a note that said, "For your future." My wedding dress cost $45 from the discount store on Route 9. Robert wore his father's suit, altered to fit him. We couldn't afford a honeymoon, so we spent our wedding night at the Millbrook Motor Inn, the only hotel in town, in a room that cost $32. The early years of our marriage were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. We lived in a cramped two-bedroom apartment above Henderson's laundromat on Maple Street. The constant rumble of washing machines and dryers became the soundtrack to our lives. The smell of detergent and fabric softener seeped through the floorboards. In the summer, the heat from the dryers below made our apartment unbearably hot. In the winter, we were grateful for that extra warmth because we couldn't afford to run our own heater much. Robert worked double shifts at the factory, often 16-hour days, coming home so exhausted he could barely eat the dinner I'd prepared before collapsing into bed. I took night classes in accounting at the community college 30 minutes away, determined to build a better future for us. I'd leave for class at 6 in the evening, get home at 11 at night, do homework until 1 in the morning, then wake up at 5 to prepare Robert's lunch before heading to my own shift at the factory. We were tired all the time. We had dark circles under our eyes. Our hands were rough from factory work. But we were happy. We had each other. We had dreams. We had a plan. When Rebecca was born after 3 years of marriage, our tiny apartment felt even smaller. But our hearts expanded infinitely. She was a beautiful baby, 7 pounds and 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair like Robert's and my green eyes. I quit my job at the factory to raise her, and Robert took on even more overtime hours to compensate for my lost income. He worked so much that first year of Rebecca's life that I worried he'd collapse from exhaustion. "I'm doing this for our family," he'd say when I begged him to. Slow down, to rest, to take care of himself. I want Rebecca to have everything we didn't have. I want her to go to college. I want her to never worry about money the way we do. 3 years later, Sarah arrived, completing our family. She was smaller than Rebecca had been, just 6 pounds even, and she cried constantly for the first 6 months of her life. Colic, the doctor said. Nothing to worry about, just patience and time. Those were the hardest 6 months of my life, walking the floor with a screaming infant, while Robert worked night shifts, trying to soothe her, while Rebecca, now 3, demanded attention and felt jealous of her new sister. But we got through it. We always got through everything together. I stayed home with the girls for the next 10 years, living on Robert's factory salary alone. I learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. I clipped coupons religiously. I sewed the girls' clothes by hand, using patterns from the library and fabric from the discount store. I packed homemade lunches every single day because buying school lunch was too expensive. I volunteered at their schools, going on field trips and helping in classrooms because I wanted to be involved in their education, even though we couldn't afford expensive educational programs or tutors. Robert taught them to ride bikes in the parking lot behind our apartment building. He helped with homework every night after dinner, patiently explaining math problems and reading comprehension questions, even when he was exhausted from his shift. He never missed a single school play or recital or parent-teacher conference, no matter how much overtime he had to give up to be there. We sacrificed everything for our daughters. When Rebecca wanted to take piano lessons, we went without new clothes for a year to afford them. When Sarah wanted to join the soccer team, Robert worked extra weekend shifts to pay for the equipment and fees. When both girls needed new winter coats, we wore our old ones with the broken zippers and missing buttons for another season. Your daughters will remember these sacrifices, my mother told me one Thanksgiving when the girls were 8 and 5. They'll understand what you gave up for them. They'll appreciate it someday. I believed her. I thought our sacrifices were building something important, something meaningful. I thought we were teaching our daughters about love and family and what really mattered in life. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Something fundamental shifted in who our daughters were becoming. Rebecca was always the ambitious one, even as a child. While other kids played with dolls or built forts, Rebecca organized neighborhood businesses. At 8 years old, she ran a lemonade stand that made $20 in a single afternoon. At 10, she started a dog walking service that had 5 regular clients. At 12, she was tutoring younger kids in math for $5 an hour. She's an entrepreneur, Robert said, proudly. She's going to be successful. And she was. Rebecca excelled in school, graduating valedictorian of her high school class. She got a full academic scholarship to State University, majoring in business administration. We were so proud, we could barely contain ourselves. Our daughter, the first person in either of our families to go to college, and she wasn't even paying for it. But when Rebecca came home for winter break of her freshman year, she was different. She criticized our apartment, saying it was embarrassing when her new college friends asked where she lived. She complained about our old furniture, our outdated television, our lack of a computer. She asked why we didn't have nicer things, why we lived so modestly, why we couldn't be more like her roommates' parents who had a big house and new cars. We've been saving for your education, Robert explained patiently. We wanted to make sure you and Sarah had opportunities. But I have a scholarship, Rebecca shot back. You didn't need to live like this. You chose to. The criticism stung, but we told ourselves it was just her adjusting to a new environment, being exposed to wealthier students, feeling self-conscious. She'd come around. She'd remember her values. She didn't. Rebecca graduated with honors and immediately got a job at Thornton Marketing Group, a prestigious firm in the city 2 hours away. Her starting salary was $45,000 a year, more than Robert made after 25 years at the factory. Within 2 years, she was making $60,000. Within 5 years, she was making $80,000. Sarah followed her sister's path almost exactly, as she'd always done. She was quieter than Rebecca, less overtly ambitious, but equally driven. She studied finance at the same university, graduated with high honors, and got a job at Westfield Wealth Management in the city. Her starting salary was $50,000 a year. Suddenly, our daughters were making more money than Robert and I had ever seen. They moved to expensive apartments in the city. They bought designer clothes and expensive cars. They traveled to places we'd only seen in magazines: Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Tokyo. At first, I was so proud. I thought my heart would burst. My daughters had achieved what Robert and I never could. They'd escaped the cycle of poverty and hard labor that had defined our lives. They'd built successful careers, found financial security, created opportunities we'd only dreamed about. But little by little, that pride turned into sadness, then confusion, Then something darker I didn't want to name. Visits became less frequent. Rebecca, who used to come home every weekend during college, now came home once a month, then once every 2 months, then only on major holidays. Sarah's visits followed the same declining pattern. Phone calls grew shorter. "I'm busy, Mom. I have to go," became the most common phrase I heard from both of them. When they did come home, they arrived in expensive cars that looked out of place parked in front of our apartment building. Rebecca drove a silver BMW that cost more than Robert made in 2 years. Sarah drove a white Lexus. They wore clothes with designer labels I recognized from magazines: Gucci, Prada, Michael Kors. Their purses cost more than our monthly rent. They'd look at our apartment with expressions I'd seen before, but had tried to ignore. Pity mixed with embarrassment. Discomfort with where they came from. Shame about the parents who'd sacrificed everything to give them their successful lives. "Mom, Dad," Rebecca said during one of their sporadic visits about 5 years ago, "you really should consider moving somewhere better. This apartment is falling apart. The neighborhood has gotten worse. You deserve something nicer." She was right that the apartment was old. The carpet was worn through in spots. The wallpaper was peeling. The kitchen appliances were from the 1980s. But it was our home. It held all our memories. It was where we'd raised our daughters, where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we'd laughed and cried and built our life together. "We're comfortable here," Robert replied, always the diplomat. "We know our neighbors. We're close to our jobs. Everything we need is nearby." "But you could afford something better?" Sarah insisted. "You've been working for over 30 years. You must have savings." We did have savings, about $45,000 accumulated over 3 decades of careful budgeting and sacrifice. We'd planned to use it for retirement, maybe to buy a small house when Robert finally stopped working. "We're saving for retirement," I explained. "We want to make sure we don't burden you girls when we're older." Rebecca and Sarah exchanged a look I couldn't decipher at the time, but would later understand with horrible clarity. It was a look of calculation, of assessment, of measuring our worth in dollars and cents, rather than love and sacrifice. The conversations became more frequent and more pointed over the following years. Rebecca would call and casually mention that property values in Millbrook were rising, that our apartment building might be worth something if we looked into buying it from our landlord. Sarah would send articles about downsizing and simplifying, about retirement communities that offered freedom from maintenance and worry. "You're getting older," Rebecca said bluntly during a visit 3 years ago. "Dad, you're 70 now. Mom, you're 65. You need to start thinking about the future." "We are thinking about the future," Robert replied. "We're healthy. We're working. We're fine." But Rebecca wasn't satisfied. "What about your wills? Do you have everything in order? Life insurance? Medical directives?" The questions felt intrusive, but we assumed they came from a place of concern. Our daughters were just worried about us, planning ahead, being responsible adults. That's what we told ourselves. Everything changed when Rebecca married Marcus Thornton 3 years ago. Marcus came from old money, the kind of wealth that spans generations and creates its own gravitational pull. His family owned commercial real estate across 3 states. He'd never worried about money a day in his life. Never understood what it meant to choose between buying groceries and paying the electric bill. Never experienced the anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck. The first time Rebecca brought Marcus to meet us, I spent 3 days cleaning our apartment until it shined. I bought new towels and sheets, spending money we'd budgeted for something else. I planned an elaborate dinner with pot roast and homemade rolls and apple pie, Robert's specialty dessert. Marcus arrived in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than our car. He was tall, handsome in a generic way, with perfect teeth and carefully styled hair. He shook Robert's hand with just the tips of his fingers, as if afraid of contamination. He surveyed our home like an inspector finding code violations, his eyes lingering on every worn piece of furniture, every outdated decoration, every sign of our working class life. Charming, he said with a smile that was really a sneer. Very authentic. Very rustic. During dinner, Marcus dominated the conversation with stories of his business deals and property acquisitions. He talked about buildings like they were chess pieces, about tenants like they were inconveniences, about money like it was a game with winners and losers. The key to wealth, Marcus announced while cutting into the pot roast I'd spent hours preparing, is knowing when to liquidate underperforming assets. You can't let sentimentality cloud your financial judgment. He looked directly at Robert when he said it, and I realized with a chill that Marcus was talking about us. We were the underperforming assets. We were the sentimentality that needed to be eliminated. After that dinner, Rebecca's behavior shifted dramatically. She began calling more frequently, but the conversations were never about how we were doing, how we were feeling, what was happening in our lives. Instead, every call circled back to the same topics: our finances, our insurance, our plans for the future, our assets. Dad, have you thought about increasing your life insurance? She asked during one call about 6 months after her wedding. Marcus knows an excellent insurance agent. He could get you a great policy at your age. I have life insurance, Robert replied carefully. $25,000. That's enough to cover funeral expenses and leave your mother something. 25,000? Rebecca's voice went up an octave. Dad, that's nothing in today's economy. What if something happened to you? How would Mom survive? You need at least 250,000, maybe 500,000. Rebecca, the premiums for that kind of coverage would be astronomical at my age, Robert explained patiently. We can't afford it. But you have savings, she pressed. You could use some of that for premiums now, and it would protect Mom's future. The logic seemed sound on the surface, but something about the urgency in her voice bothered Robert. Why was our 38-year-old daughter, who made more in a month than we made in 6 months, so concerned about our life insurance? Sarah joined the campaign a week later. She called with the same talking points, almost word for word what Rebecca had said. They'd clearly coordinated their approach. Mom, you need to think about your future, Sarah said during what I thought would be a casual phone call to catch up. What if something happened to Dad? How would you live on just his factory pension? You need life insurance to protect yourself. We have savings, I reminded her. We've been careful with money our whole lives. $45,000 won't last long, Sarah said, and I froze. How did she know exactly how much we had saved? We'd never told our daughters the specific amount. That's barely 2 years of expenses. You need proper planning. How do you know how much we have saved? I asked directly. There was a pause. Then Sarah recovered. I'm just estimating based on Dad's salary and years of work. I do this for clients all the time. Financial planning is my job, remember? But it felt like more than an estimate. It felt like she knew, like she'd somehow found out our exact financial situation. Over the next few months, the pressure intensified. Both daughters, sometimes separately and sometimes together, pushed us about insurance, about selling our apartment, about simplifying our lives, about planning for mom's future. Marcus was always mentioned as a resource, someone who could help us, someone who knew about these things. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Rebecca said during one particularly uncomfortable visit where she'd brought printed information about life insurance policies. We love you, and we worry. But their version of love felt transactional, conditional, based on what we could provide rather than who we were. It didn't feel like the love we'd given them. Unconditional, sacrificial, expecting nothing in return except their happiness. Robert started having doubts. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at paperwork, his expression troubled. Margaret, he said one night about 2 months before his supposed death. Something's wrong with our girls. This isn't normal concern. This is something else. They're just worried about us getting older, I replied, wanting desperately to believe it. They want to make sure we're prepared. No, Robert shook his head firmly. This is about money. They're asking about my life insurance the way Marcus talks about property investments, like I'm an asset they're waiting to liquidate. The words chilled me, but I couldn't accept them. Not yet. These were our daughters, the babies I'd nursed and rocked and sang to sleep, the little girls I'd walked to school holding their hands, the teenagers I'd stayed up late talking to about their dreams and fears. They couldn't be plotting something sinister. Could they? Robert became increasingly paranoid over the following weeks. He started keeping copies of important documents at work. He changed his computer passwords. He began writing down every conversation with our daughters, noting dates and times and exactly what was said. "You think I'm crazy," he said one evening when he caught me watching him write in a notebook. "You think I'm being paranoid." "I think you're stressed," I replied gently. "Maybe you should retire. You've worked so hard for so long. Maybe it's time to rest." "I'll rest when I know you're safe," he said cryptically. Then he added something that haunts me to this day. "If something happens to me, Margaret, promise me you'll question everything. Don't believe what they tell you. Dig deeper. Find the truth." "Nothing's going to happen to you," I said, squeezing his hand. "We're going to grow old together, just like we always planned." But Robert had sensed something I was still too blind to see. Our daughters weren't worried about our future. They were impatient for their inheritance, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. The visits became more uncomfortable as Rebecca and Sarah's true intentions became harder to disguise. They'd arrive with their expensive cars and designer clothes and immediately start inventory of our possessions. Rebecca would comment on the potential resale value of our furniture. Sarah would ask if we'd had the apartment appraised. Marcus, when he deigned to visit, would walk around like he was calculating square footage and market rates. "This building could be converted to condos," he mentioned casually during one visit, as if we weren't sitting right there listening. "The location is decent. With some updates, you could sell these units for 80 to 100,000 each." "We rent," Robert reminded him. "We don't own the building." "Have you considered buying?" Marcus asked, his eyes gleaming with that calculating look I'd come to recognize. The landlord might sell. You could buy your unit, renovate it, flip it for a profit. I could help you with that. It was a trap, though. I didn't see it at the time. If we bought the apartment, took out a mortgage, then something happened to Robert, I'd be left with debt I couldn't manage. They could swoop in as helpers, take control of the property, sell it, and keep the proceeds while putting me in some cheap facility. Robert saw the trap. "We're not interested in buying," he said firmly. "We're comfortable renting." Marcus's face darkened. For just a moment, I saw something ugly flash across his features. Frustration, anger, thwarted greed. Then the smile returned, plastic and meaningless. "Just trying to help," he said. But he wasn't trying to help. None of them were. About 6 weeks before Robert's supposed death, something happened that should have been a clear warning. Rebecca came to visit alone, without calling ahead, which she never did. She seemed agitated, nervous, checking her phone constantly. "Mom, Dad?" she said, settling at our kitchen table with unusual intensity. "I need to talk to you about something important. Marcus and I are planning to start a family." "That's wonderful!" I exclaimed, immediately thinking about grandchildren, about babies to hold and love. "When?" "Soon," Rebecca said vaguely. "But we need to be financially stable first. Marcus's business is going through a rough patch. We've had some unexpected expenses. We need capital." There it was, the real reason for her visit. "We can't help you financially, sweetheart," Robert said gently. "Our savings are for retirement. We're going to need it." Rebecca's face hardened. "I'm not asking for a loan, Dad. I'm asking you to think about our family's future. You're 70 years old. You've worked your whole life. Don't you think it's time to enjoy your retirement? To travel? To do the things you always wanted to do?" "We can't afford to retire yet," I explained. "We need to work a few more years." "But what if something happened to you?" Rebecca pressed, looking at Robert with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "What if you had an accident? What if you got sick? Wouldn't you want to know that Mom was taken care of, that your family was secure?" "I have life insurance for that," Robert said, his voice taking on an edge. $25,000. It's enough." "It's not enough!" Rebecca's voice rose. "Dad, you need to think about this seriously. Marcus knows an insurance agent who could get you a policy for $500,000. The premiums would be high, but you could use some of your savings." "No," Robert said firmly. "We're not doing that." Rebecca's expression went cold. "Fine. But don't come crying to us when you're old and broke and have nowhere to go." She left, without even saying goodbye. I stood at the window watching her BMW speed away, feeling like I'd just witnessed something important, but not quite understanding what. "She threatened us," Robert said quietly behind me. "Our own daughter just threatened us." "She's just stressed about money," I said, still making excuses. "Marcus must be in more financial trouble than they've let on." "Or they're just greedy," Robert replied. "Margaret, we need to be careful. Something bad is brewing. I can feel it." 2 weeks later, Sarah came to visit with the same agenda. She was smoother than Rebecca, more subtle, but the message was the same. Increase the life insurance, think about the future, consider their needs, plan for contingencies. When Robert refused, Sarah's mask slipped just like her sister's had. "You're being selfish," she said coldly. "You raised us to think about family, but all you think about is yourselves." The irony was staggering. We'd sacrificed everything for them, and now they were calling us selfish for not volunteering to die and leave them money. After Sarah left, Robert made a decision. He pulled out the phone book and started calling private investigators. He interviewed 3 before settling on James Crawford, a former police detective who specialized in domestic cases. "I need you to investigate my daughters," Robert told him during their first meeting. He'd made me come along, wanting a witness. "I think they're planning something. I don't know what exactly, but I think my life might be in danger." Crawford didn't laugh or dismiss the concern. He'd seen enough in his career to know that the most dangerous criminals are often family members motivated by greed. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out a notepad. Robert explained the pressure about life insurance, the increasingly urgent conversations about money, the cold threats disguised as concern, the way both daughters seemed to be coordinating their approach, the involvement of Marcus with his business troubles, and calculating nature. "Here's what I want," Robert said. "I want surveillance on my daughters. I want to know who they're meeting with, what they're planning. I want listening devices in my home so we can record any conversations. And I want you to do background checks on Marcus, on any associates of theirs who might be involved in whatever this is." "That's going to be expensive," Crawford warned. "I have $45,000 in savings," Robert said. "Use whatever you need. My life might depend on it. My wife's life definitely will." Crawford started his investigation immediately. Within a week, he'd uncovered disturbing information. Marcus's business wasn't just going through a rough patch. He was on the verge of bankruptcy. He owed over $200,000 to various creditors, including some very dangerous people who weren't likely to accept payment plans. Rebecca and Sarah's financial situations were also much worse than they'd presented. Rebecca had credit card debt of $70,000, maintaining a lifestyle she couldn't afford to impress Marcus's wealthy family. Sarah had gambling problems that had cost her $40,000 in the last year alone, secret debts her husband knew nothing about. "Your daughters are desperate," Crawford told us during his second report. "Desperate people do desperate things." He installed listening devices in our apartment, tiny microphones that recorded everything. He set up surveillance cameras outside. He began following Rebecca and Sarah, documenting their movements, their contacts, their meetings. What he discovered over the next 4 weeks made my blood run cold. Rebecca and Sarah were meeting regularly at a coffee shop in the city, always without their husbands, always paying in cash. Crawford recorded their conversations with a directional microphone. "We can't wait any longer." Rebecca's voice came through clearly on the recording Crawford played for us. "Marcus's creditors are threatening to seize our assets. We need that insurance money now." "But how?" Sarah asked. "Dad's not going to increase his policy. We tried." "Then we work with what we have," Rebecca replied coldly. $25,000 isn't much, but it's a start. And there's the savings, the apartment, the pension. Once Dad's gone, Mom will be easy to manipulate. My hands shook as I listened. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. But Crawford had more. "They've been researching ways to make a death look accidental," he said, showing us printouts of internet searches from Rebecca's computer. Carbon monoxide poisoning, falls downstairs, drug interactions, and most recently, car accidents. Robert's face went white. "Car accidents?" Crawford nodded grimly. 3 weeks ago, Rebecca met with a man named Vincent Russo at an auto body shop in the industrial district. Russo has a criminal record: fraud, vehicle tampering, insurance scams. He's known in certain circles as someone who can solve problems involving vehicles. What kind of problems? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. The kind where brake lines get cut, where steering mechanisms fail, where accidents happen. Crawford showed us photographs he'd taken outside the auto body shop. Rebecca shaking hands with a rough-looking man in his 40s with grease under his fingernails and a criminal's eyes. Rebecca handing him an envelope. Rebecca and the man looking at photographs of Robert's car, a 2003 Honda Civic we'd owned for 15 years. This meeting happened 3 days ago, Crawford said. I ran facial recognition on the man, Vincent Russo, age 47, convicted of insurance fraud in 2008, suspected in at least 3 cases of staged vehicle accidents, never proven because the drivers died and couldn't testify. The room spun around me. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. You're saying our daughters hired someone to kill their father? That's exactly what I'm saying, Crawford replied. And there's more. He played another recording, this one from our own apartment. Rebecca and Sarah had visited 2 days ago, while Robert was at work. I'd been there, serving them tea and cookies, completely oblivious to what they were really discussing. Sarah's voice on the recording. Once Dad's gone, we need to move fast on Mom. We can't give her time to think clearly or consult with anyone. Rebecca's voice. I've already contacted Dr. Harrison. He'll sign whatever mental evaluation we need. He owes Marcus a favor for helping with his divorce. Sarah. And the lawyer Marcus knows can fast-track the incompetency hearing. We could have power of attorney within 2 weeks. Rebecca. Then we sell everything, put her in the cheapest facility we can find, and split the proceeds. Even with Dad's small life insurance, we're looking at close to $200,000 total. Sarah. Is that enough to cover your debts? Rebecca. It'll buy us time. And once Mom's inheritance comes through eventually, that's another windfall. I'd been sitting right there during this conversation, smiling and pouring tea, while my daughters casually planned to murder my husband and institutionalize me against my will. They disguised their evil plotting as concern about Mom's future if anything happened to Dad. Speaking in code I was too trusting to decipher. Why didn't you stop them right then? I demanded of Crawford, anger surging through my shock. Why didn't you call the police? Because they hadn't done anything yet, Crawford explained. Talking about a crime isn't the same as committing one. We need solid evidence of an actual attempt, or any halfway decent lawyer would get the case thrown out. Your daughters are careful. They've been smart about this. So, what do we do? Robert asked, his face pale, but his voice steady. My husband had always been calm in a crisis. Crawford leaned forward. We set a trap. We let them think their plan is working. We document everything. And when they make their move, we catch them in the act. You want to use my husband as bait. I was horrified. I want to save his life and put your daughters in prison where they belong, Crawford corrected. The alternative is we go to the police now with what we have. They investigate for months while Rebecca and Sarah lawyer up and destroy evidence, and maybe we get a conviction. Meanwhile, they know we're onto them. They get more desperate, and they might try something impulsive that actually succeeds in killing Robert. Robert squeezed my hand. He's right, Margaret. We need to see this through. The plan Crawford devised was elaborate and risky. First, Robert would agree to increase his life insurance, but secretly, he'd update his will to exclude Rebecca and Sarah entirely, leaving everything to me with provisions that I couldn't change for 10 years. Second, Crawford would monitor Russo and document any tampering with Robert's vehicle. Third, when the accident was staged, Robert wouldn't be in the car. "We'll use a body double," Crawford explained. "I know a man who does stunt work, similar build to Robert. We'll fake Robert's death, let your daughters think they've succeeded, and document their reactions. Once they start accessing accounts and moving money based on Robert being dead, we have them for fraud and conspiracy. When we reveal Robert's alive, we add attempted murder." "What about the body?" I asked. "They'll want to see it, identify it." "We'll use prosthetics and a badly damaged face," Crawford said. "The morgue attendant is a friend. He'll cooperate. Your daughters will see what they expect to see. Their father, dead from a car accident." It was a crazy plan. But we were dealing with crazy circumstances. Our own daughters were trying to murder Robert for insurance money. Normal rules didn't apply anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert played his part perfectly. He called Rebecca and said he'd been thinking about what she said, about protecting my future, about being responsible. He agreed to meet with Marcus's insurance agent. I listened on the extension when Rebecca called back, her voice filled with barely concealed excitement. "Dad, I'm so proud of you for doing this. You're making the right decision. I want to make sure Margaret is taken care of." Robert said, his voice convincingly weary. "You were right. I've been selfish, only thinking about today instead of planning for tomorrow." "Exactly," Rebecca agreed eagerly. "And don't worry about the premiums. Sarah and I will help you pay them. That's what family does." Of course they'd help pay the premiums. It was an investment that would pay off handsomely once Robert was dead. Robert met with the insurance agent, a slick man in his 30s named Derek Chen, who clearly knew exactly what game was being played. He recommended a policy for $500,000 with double indemnity for accidental death, meaning $1 million if Robert died in an accident. "The premiums will be substantial at your age," Chen said, winking at Robert. "But your daughters have assured me they'll help cover costs." Robert signed the paperwork, but that same afternoon, he went to his lawyer and updated his will. Everything went to me, with the stipulation that Rebecca and Sarah would receive exactly $1 each, and that I couldn't change the will for 10 years or the money would go to charity. "They'll contest it," the lawyer warned. "Let them try," Robert said. "I'm documenting everything. Their contest will fail." The life insurance policy was approved within a week, expedited by Marcus's connections. Robert made his first premium payment of $800, money that came from our savings, money that would supposedly protect my future but was really financing his murder. Crawford intensified his surveillance. He documented 3 more meetings between Rebecca and Vincent Russo. He recorded phone conversations where Rebecca and Sarah discussed the timeline and making sure it looks completely accidental. And Mom's confusion will work in our favor. "They're planning it for next Tuesday," Crawford informed us exactly 1 week before the staged accident. "Russo is going to cut the brake lines on Robert's car Monday night. Tuesday morning, when Robert drives to his weekly golf game on Highway 52, the brakes will fail on that steep hill near Miller's Creek. The car will go off the road, down the embankment, hit the trees. At that speed, survival would be unlikely." How do you know all this? I asked, my voice shaking. I bugged Russo's phone, Crawford admitted. Not legally admissible in court, but it lets me stay ahead of them. I also have a man watching your car 24/7. The moment Russo tampers with it, we'll have video evidence. Robert and I spent that weekend in a strange state of surreal calm. We knew what was coming. We knew our daughters were trying to kill him. But we also knew Crawford had a plan to stop it. Are you scared? I asked Robert on Sunday night as we lay in bed, possibly our last night together before the elaborate deception began. Terrified, he admitted. Not of dying. Crawford's plan will work. But terrified of what we've learned about our daughters. How did we raise people capable of this? We didn't raise these people, I said firmly. We raised loving, kind daughters. Somewhere along the way, they became different people. That's not our fault. Isn't it? Robert asked. Maybe we should have said no more often. Maybe we spoiled them, gave them too much, made them think the world owed them everything. We gave them love and opportunities, I replied. What they chose to do with those things is on them, not us. But I wondered, in the dark hours of that night, where we'd gone wrong. Had we been too soft, too giving? Had we failed to teach them about consequences, about gratitude, about the value of human life over material possessions? Or were Rebecca and Sarah simply broken in some fundamental way that had nothing to do with how we raised them? Were some people just born with the capacity for evil, waiting for the right circumstances to bring it out? Monday night, Crawford called at 2:17 a.m. It's happening. Russo just entered your apartment parking lot. He's approaching Robert's vehicle now. Robert and I rushed to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtains. In the parking lot below, illuminated by a single streetlight, we saw a figure crouched beside Robert's Honda. Vincent Russo, working with practiced efficiency, sliding under the car with tools. Crawford's surveillance team was filming everything from 3 different angles. The evidence was being documented. Our daughter's murder plot was being captured on video. Russo worked for approximately 15 minutes, then slid out from under the car, gathered his tools, and disappeared into the night. Robert's car now had compromised brake lines that would fail catastrophically once enough brake fluid leaked out, probably after 10 or 15 minutes of driving, right around the time Robert would reach that dangerous hill on Highway 52. It's done, Crawford said when he called 20 minutes later. We have everything on video. Tomorrow morning, don't drive your car. My stunt driver will pick it up at 6 a.m. and take it to the golf course. He'll drive it on Highway 52 at your usual time. The accident will happen exactly as they planned, except Robert won't be in the car. What about the body? I asked, the reality of what we were doing hitting me hard. Who's going to die in Robert's place? No one, Crawford assured me. We're using a cadaver from the medical school, a homeless man named David Chen, who died of natural causes 3 days ago and donated his body to science. His family signed off on this use. We'll stage the accident, put Chen's body in the driver's seat with Robert's identification, and torch the car enough to make facial identification difficult. The medical examiner is in on it. He'll confirm identity through dental records, which we've temporarily switched. It's all legal, all approved through channels you don't want to know about. The moral ambiguity of using a dead man's body as part of an elaborate sting operation bothered me. But Crawford assured me Chen's family understood and supported the plan. Their father's final act would be helping catch murderers and save a life. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold. Robert kissed me goodbye at 6 a.m., just like he did every Tuesday before his golf game. But instead of driving away, he walked to Crawford's van parked 2 blocks away. The stunt driver, wearing Robert's clothes and a hat to obscure his face from any security cameras, drove Robert's Honda out of the parking lot at exactly 6:43 a.m., Robert's usual departure time. I stayed home, pacing our apartment, waiting for the phone call that would change everything. It came at 11:47 a.m. Detective Morris from the county police, his voice professionally somber. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm calling about your husband, Robert. There's been an accident on Highway 52. You need to come to County Memorial Hospital immediately." I forced myself to cry, to sound shocked and panicked, even though I knew it was all staged. "What happened? Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay." "Just come to the hospital, ma'am, as quickly as you can." I drove to County Memorial with my heart pounding, not from fear. I knew Robert was safe, but from anticipation. The trap was set. Now we'd see how our daughters reacted. When I arrived at the hospital, Rebecca and Sarah were already there. That was the first red flag. I'd just received the call 20 minutes ago. The hospital was an hour from the city where they both worked. How had they gotten here so fast? Unless they'd been waiting nearby, expecting the call, ready to rush over and play their parts as grieving daughters. "Mom!" Rebecca rushed over, her makeup perfect despite her supposedly frantic drive. Her tears looked real, but I'd learned to see through her performances. "It's Dad. He crashed his car. They said he didn't survive." The words were right, but the delivery was wrong. There was excitement beneath her grief, anticipation poorly disguised as shock. Sarah stood beside her, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "The police said his brakes failed on that hill near Miller's Creek. The car went off the road and hit a tree. He died on impact." "I need to see him," I said, playing my part, letting my voice break with genuine emotion, even though I knew Robert was alive and safe. "Mom, maybe you should wait," Rebecca said, placing a hand on my arm. "The injuries were severe. You don't want that to be your last memory of him." But I insisted, just as Crawford had coached me to do. I needed to see how thoroughly they'd staged this deception, needed to understand the full scope of what my daughters had arranged. A nurse led me to the morgue in the hospital basement. The medical examiner, Dr. Patterson, was waiting. He was part of Crawford's plan, one of the few people who knew the truth. "Mrs. Wilson," he said gently, "I need to prepare you. Your husband's injuries were extensive, particularly to his face and upper body. The impact was severe, and there was a fire." He pulled back the sheet covering the body on the metal table. I gasped, despite knowing it wasn't really Robert. The body was approximately Robert's size and build, dressed in clothes I recognized. Robert's favorite golf shirt, his khaki pants. The face was destroyed, blackened by fire and swollen beyond recognition. Wedding ring on the left hand, Robert's watch on the wrist. David Chen's body, staged to look like my husband. The deception was complete. "Is this your husband?" Dr. Patterson asked formally, for the record. "Yes," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Real tears, because even though I knew Robert was alive, I was mourning something else. The death of my family, the death of my illusions about my daughters, the death of everything I'd believed about love and motherhood. I returned to the waiting room where Rebecca and Sarah hovered, their expressions a mixture of concern and something else. Impatience? Anticipation? They were waiting for me to confirm the death, to make it official, to start the process that would lead to their payday. "It's him," I said, collapsing into a plastic chair. "He's really gone." Rebecca and Sarah exchanged a look so brief. I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. Satisfaction, relief, the look of people whose plan had succeeded. "We'll take care of everything, Mom," Rebecca said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. Her grip was cold. "The funeral arrangements, the paperwork, all of it. You don't need to worry about anything." "We need to call the insurance company," Sarah added, then caught herself. "I mean, eventually, when you're ready. There's no rush." But there was a rush. I could see it in their eyes, in the way they kept checking their phones, in the tension thrumming through both of them. Over the next 3 days, Rebecca and Sarah took control of everything with an efficiency that would have seemed caring if I didn't know the truth. They selected the funeral home, the cheapest one in the county. They chose the simplest casket available. They scheduled the service for Friday, just 3 days after the accident, giving people barely any time to make arrangements to attend. "We want to keep it small and intimate," Rebecca explained when I questioned the rushed timeline. "Dad wouldn't have wanted a big fuss." But Robert had dozens of friends, golf buddies, former co-workers from the factory, neighbors from our building, people from our church. He would have wanted them there to say goodbye. Rebecca's real motivation was speed. The faster we buried the body, the faster she could file the insurance claim, the faster she'd get her money. I played my part as the grieving widow. Dazed and compliant, I let them make all the decisions. I signed whatever papers they put in front of me. And Crawford's team documented everything. Every phone call, every meeting, every conversation. The recordings from those 3 days were damning. Rebecca, on the phone with the insurance company. "My father died in a car accident on Tuesday. I'm calling to inquire about the policy payout timeline." "Yes, I understand there's usually an investigation, but the police have ruled it an accident. The brake lines failed. It's tragic, but straightforward. How soon can the claim be processed?" Sarah, meeting with a lawyer Marcus had recommended. "We need to start the process to have my mother declared incompetent. She's not handling my father's death well. She's confused, not making sense. We're worried about her ability to make financial decisions." "Yes, I understand it takes time, but we're concerned she might do something rash with the insurance money when it comes through. We just want to protect her." Rebecca and Sarah together, in Rebecca's car, not knowing Crawford had planted a listening device there. "We need to move fast on the house. Once the funeral's over, we start pressuring Mom to sell. Marcus has a buyer lined up, a development company that'll pay $75,000 cash. We tell Mom it's a fair price. She signs over the deed. We split the money." Sarah, "What about the savings account?" Rebecca, "I already added my name to it yesterday. Mom signed the paperwork without even reading it. She's so out of it, she doesn't know what she's agreeing to. The minute the death certificate is filed, I transfer everything to an account she can't access." Sarah, "And the pension?" Rebecca, "That goes directly to Mom, unfortunately. But once we have power of attorney, we control it. We give her a small allowance, put her somewhere cheap, and keep the rest." Sarah, "How much do you think we're looking at total?" Rebecca, "Between the insurance, the house sale, the savings, and controlling the pension for however many years Mom lives? At least 400,000, maybe 500 if we're smart about it. Sarah. And Marcus's debt? Rebecca. Paid off completely. We'll finally be free. Every word was recorded. Every piece of evidence was documented. My daughters were building their own prison, one conversation at a time. The funeral was on Friday, a cold October morning, with gray skies that threatened rain. Fewer than 20 people attended. Rebecca had notified almost no one, claiming she didn't have contact information, claiming Dad wanted something private, claiming. I stood beside the grave, wearing my old black coat, and waited. This was the moment Crawford had choreographed carefully. This was when I'd receive the text that would start the next phase. Right on schedule, as the pastor droned through his generic service about a man he'd never met, my phone vibrated. I pulled it from my pocket with trembling hands. I am still alive. Trust no one. My gasp was real, my shock genuine, even though I'd known it was coming. The words on the screen made everything real, in a way it hadn't been before. Robert was alive. This whole elaborate deception was actually happening. Who is this? I typed back, my fingers shaking. It's complicated. Watch our daughters carefully. Nothing is what it seems. I looked up from my phone, and for the first time, I truly saw my daughters. Not as the children I'd raised, but as the criminals they'd become. Rebecca dabbing at fake tears. Sarah checking her phone with barely concealed impatience. Both of them waiting for the charade to end so they could start claiming their blood money. Are you okay, Mom? Rebecca asked, noticing my distraction. I got a strange text, I stammered, playing confused and overwhelmed. It's probably nothing, Sarah said quickly. Grief can make us imagine things. Maybe you should give me your phone. Let me handle any messages for a while. Of course she wanted my phone. She wanted to control my communication, isolate me, prevent me from reaching out to anyone who might question what was happening. No, I said firmly, surprising myself. I can manage my own phone. Rebecca and Sarah exchanged another one of their looks, this one tinged with concern. Was I going to be a problem? Was I going to resist their plans? After the funeral, during the awkward gathering at Rebecca's house, catered food that cost more than our monthly grocery budget, wine that probably cost more than our monthly rent. My phone buzzed again. Check the bank account. See who's been moving money. I excused myself to the bathroom and logged into our bank account on my phone. What I saw made my hands shake with rage rather than grief. $45,000 in savings, accumulated over 30 years of sacrifice, was gone. The account showed a transfer yesterday, Thursday afternoon, to an account I didn't recognize. Rebecca had cleaned us out. I returned to the living room where my daughters were playing hostess, accepting condolences from the few people who'd attended, performing their grief for an audience. Rebecca, I said quietly, pulling her aside. I need to talk to you about the bank account. Her face went carefully blank. What about it? The savings are gone, all of it. Where did the money go? Oh, Mom, she said with a patronizing smile. I moved it to a safer account. For your protection. You're so vulnerable right now. We were worried about scammers taking advantage of you. Don't worry, the money's safe. In whose name? Mine, for now. But it's still your money, of course. I'm just managing it for you. It was a lie wrapped in concern, theft disguised as help. And there was nothing I could do about it. Not yet. If I confronted her now, She'd know I was suspicious. The plan required patience. Thank you, I forced myself to say, for taking care of everything. That's what daughters are for, Rebecca replied, squeezing my hand. Family takes care of family. The irony was almost too much to bear. Over the weekend, Rebecca and Sarah ramped up their campaign to take control of my life. They arrived at my apartment Saturday morning with boxes and cleaning supplies. We're going to help you sort through Dad's things, Rebecca announced, already opening closets without asking permission. It's therapeutic to clean house after a loss. But they weren't looking for items with sentimental value to keep or donate. They were looking for valuables to sell. I watched them catalog Robert's watch collection, inexpensive timepieces he'd collected over the years, nothing worth more than $100 each. I saw Sarah photograph our wedding china, the set my mother had given us, checking prices on her phone. Mom, you should really think about moving, Rebecca said as she rifled through Robert's desk. This apartment has so many memories. It might be easier to start fresh somewhere new. Somewhere new meant somewhere they controlled, somewhere cheap, somewhere that would free up assets they could access. I'm not ready to move, I said firmly. Of course not now, Sarah interjected quickly. But maybe in a few months. There are lovely senior communities with activities and social opportunities. You wouldn't be lonely. I wouldn't be lonely because I'd be surrounded by other elderly people they'd also manipulated and institutionalized against their will. On Sunday, they brought the papers. Power of attorney documents, typed up by Marcus's lawyer, giving Rebecca and Sarah complete control over my finances, my medical decisions, my living situation, every aspect of my life. It's just a precaution, Mom, Rebecca said, spreading the documents on my kitchen table. In case something happens to you, or if you need help managing things, we just want to make sure we can take care of you. I picked up the papers and pretended to read them, but my vision was blurred with tears of rage. This was it. This was the final step of their plan. Once I signed these documents, they'd have complete control. They could institutionalize me, sell my apartment, access every penny I had, and there would be nothing I could do about it. I need to think about this, I said, setting the papers down. What's there to think about? Sarah pressed. We're your daughters. You trust us, right? That was the question, wasn't it? Did I trust them? Before all this, I would have said yes, without hesitation. Now I knew the truth. They were criminals who'd murdered a homeless man and staged my husband's death for insurance money. They were planning to steal everything I had and lock me away in some facility where I'd die alone while they spent the money that cost Robert his life. I just need time, I repeated. Rebecca's expression hardened. Mom, we're trying to help you, but if you won't let us help, we might have to take other steps. We've been documenting your confusion, your memory problems, your inability to handle basic tasks. Dr. Harrison is prepared to testify about your declining mental state. It was a threat, barely disguised. Sign voluntarily, or we'll have you declared incompetent involuntarily. I'll think about it, I said again, more firmly this time. After they left, I called Crawford. They're moving faster than we expected. They want me to sign power of attorney papers. They're threatening to have me declared incompetent if I don't. Don't sign anything, Crawford instructed. We're almost ready to move. Just hold them off for a few more days. but holding them off proved difficult. Rebecca and Sarah called constantly. They showed up unannounced. They brought Marcus and his lawyer to pressure me. They alternated between sweet manipulation and barely veiled threats. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the funeral, I received the call I'd been waiting for. "Mrs. Wilson, this is James Crawford. Can you meet me at Millbrook Diner today at 2 p.m.? It's time to end this." I arrived at Millbrook Diner 15 minutes early, my nerves stretched to breaking point. For 7 days, I'd lived this elaborate lie, pretending to mourn a husband who was still alive, pretending to trust daughters who wanted me dead or institutionalized. The weight of the deception was crushing. James Crawford is already in the back booth when I arrived, and sitting next to him, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses despite being indoors, was Robert. I nearly collapsed. Seeing him alive, real, after a week of pretending he was dead, overwhelmed me completely. I rushed to the booth and threw my arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder while other diners stared at us with concern. "It's okay, Margaret," Robert whispered, holding me tight. "It's almost over." When I finally composed myself enough to sit down, Crawford slid a thick folder across the table. "We have everything we need. 7 days of surveillance, recordings, documented theft, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, elder abuse, the list goes on. Tomorrow morning, Detective Morris and the district attorney are arresting Rebecca, Sarah, and Marcus." "Tomorrow?" I asked. "Why not today?" "Because we're setting one final trap," Crawford explained. "Your daughters have scheduled a meeting with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Rebecca's house. They're bringing Dr. Harrison and Marcus's lawyer to pressure you into signing the power of attorney papers. We're going to let that meeting happen, but we'll be recording everything. And then, right when they think they've won, Robert walks in." The plan was perfect in its poetic justice. My daughters would finally show their true colors, would reveal their intentions without any pretense, and then discover that their carefully orchestrated murder had failed, that their father was alive, that everything they'd done was documented and would send them to prison for decades. "Are you ready for this?" Robert asked me, taking my hand. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Rebecca and Sarah will go to prison. They'll hate us. We'll never have a relationship with them again." "We don't have a relationship with them now," I replied, my voice steady despite my tears. "We have a relationship with two criminals who happen to share our DNA. The daughters we raised died a long time ago, replaced by these strangers who value money more than human life." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Rebecca as a little girl, maybe 5 years old, coming into our bedroom after a nightmare. "Mommy, I'm scared," she'd whispered, and I'd held her close, promising that nothing bad would ever happen to her while I was there to protect her. Where was that little girl now? What had happened to transform her into someone capable of murder? I thought about Sarah at 8, crying because she'd failed a math test, convinced she'd disappointed us. "We love you no matter what," Robert had told her, helping her study for the retest. "Grades don't determine your worth. You're precious to us just because you exist." Did she remember those words? Did they mean anything anymore? Somewhere along the way, we lost them. Or maybe they'd always had this capacity for evil, dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. Maybe some people are just broken in fundamental ways that no amount of love can fix. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully in my most worn clothes, playing the part of the confused, vulnerable widow. I didn't do my hair or put on makeup. I wanted to look defeated, easy to manipulate, so Rebecca and Sarah would let their guard down completely. Crawford had outfitted me with a wire, a tiny microphone disguised as a button on my cardigan. Robert would be listening from a van parked down the street, along with Crawford, Detective Morris, and the district attorney. Every word spoken in that meeting would be recorded as evidence. I arrived at Rebecca's house at exactly 10 a.m. Her home was in an exclusive subdivision called Thornton Estates, developed by Marcus's family. The house itself was a monument to excess. 4 bedrooms for just 2 people, marble countertops, expensive art on the walls, a 3-car garage housing Rebecca's BMW, Marcus's Mercedes, and a Porsche they used on weekends. All of it built on debt. All of it mortgaged to the hilt. All of it about to come crashing down when their creditors realized the insurance money they'd been counting on wouldn't save them. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in Rebecca's living room with Dr. Harrison and a lawyer I didn't recognize. Marcus stood by the window, checking his phone, radiating impatience. "Mom, thank you for coming," Rebecca said, ushering me to the couch with fake warmth. "We know this is difficult, but we need to finalize some things for your protection." Dr. Harrison, a thin man in his 60s with calculating eyes, smiled at me with professional sympathy. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Dr. Harrison. Your daughters have expressed concern about your well-being since your husband's passing. I'd like to ask you a few questions if that's all right." "I suppose," I said, playing confused and compliant. "What day is it today?" he asked. "Tuesday." "And what month?" "October." "Can you tell me who the president is?" I could, of course, but I hesitated deliberately, looking uncertain. I'm not sure. George, no, that's not right." Dr. Harrison made notes on his clipboard. "Mrs. Wilson, do you remember what you had for breakfast this morning?" "Toast, I think. Or maybe cereal." I let my voice waver, as if genuinely unsure. More notes. The evaluation was a farce, designed to provide documentation of cognitive decline I didn't actually have. Dr. Harrison was Marcus's friend, being paid to provide the medical evidence needed to declare me incompetent. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson," Dr. Harrison said after 10 minutes of these meaningless questions. "I'll prepare my report for your daughters." The lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, introduced herself as Linda Chen. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm here to help you understand some legal documents. Your daughters want to make sure you're protected, that someone can make decisions on your behalf if you're unable to do so." She spread the power of attorney papers on Rebecca's coffee table. Expensive glass over polished wood, probably worth more than our entire apartment's furniture combined. "These documents are quite standard," Linda explained in a soothing voice people use with children and the elderly. "They simply allow Rebecca and Sarah to help you with financial matters, medical decisions, housing arrangements, all the complicated things that might be overwhelming for you right now." "What exactly would I be signing?" I asked, wanting them to explain it clearly for the recording. "You'd be giving us legal authority to act on your behalf," Rebecca said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. Her touch made my skin crawl. "To manage your money, pay your bills, make sure you're taken care of. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." "And if I don't sign?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Sarah and Rebecca exchanged a look. Mom, we're trying to do this the easy way, Sarah said, her voice hardening. But if you're not capable of understanding what's best for you, we can go to court. Dr. Harrison's evaluation shows significant cognitive decline. A judge could order that you need a guardian, which would mean the same result, Marcus added from his position by the window. But with expensive legal fees that would come out of your estate. Why waste money on lawyers when you could just sign now and let your daughters take care of you? It was a threat dressed up as advice. Sign willingly, or we'll force you through a legal process that will drain your resources and end with the same outcome. I don't understand, I said, letting my voice crack. You're my daughters. Why does this feel like you're trying to take everything from me? We're not taking anything, Rebecca said firmly. We're protecting you. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Dad's death has affected you more than you realize. You need help, and we're offering it. By stealing my savings? The words came out before I could stop them, genuine anger breaking through my act. The room went silent. Rebecca's grip on my hand tightened painfully. We didn't steal anything, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. We moved your money to a safer account. For your protection. Without my permission. Without even telling me. That's theft. That's asset protection, Linda the lawyer interjected smoothly. Your daughters were acting in your best interest, preventing potential financial exploitation. By exploiting me themselves? I pulled my hand away from Rebecca's. You think I don't understand what's happening here? You think I'm so confused I can't see what you're doing? Marcus moved away from the window, his expression darkening. Mrs. Wilson, I think you're getting agitated. Maybe you should take a moment to calm down. I'm perfectly calm, I replied, and I'm not signing anything. Mom, Sarah's voice took on a pleading tone. Please, we're trying to help. Dad would want us to take care of you. Don't you dare invoke your father, I said, my composure cracking completely. Don't you dare pretend this is about him or about caring for me. This is about money. This has always been about money. That's ridiculous, Rebecca snapped, abandoning her sweet act. We're not. You murdered him. The words exploded out of me, 7 days of pretending finally erupting. You hired someone to tamper with his car. You staged an accident. You killed your own father for insurance money. The silence that followed was absolute. Rebecca's face went white. Sarah started shaking. Marcus looked at his lawyer, panic clear in his eyes. Dr. Harrison clutched his clipboard like a shield. Mom, you're having a psychotic break, Rebecca said carefully, as if speaking to a dangerous mental patient. You're imagining things. Dad died in an accident. The police investigated. The brake lines failed due to age and wear. The brake lines were cut by Vincent Russo, who you paid $15,000 to kill Robert, I said, standing up from the couch. I know everything. The meetings at the coffee shop, the planning sessions, the way you researched how to make murder look accidental, the fake concern about increasing Dad's life insurance, all of it. This is insane, Sarah whispered. You've lost your mind. Have I? I pulled out my phone and played one of Crawford's recordings. Rebecca's voice came through clearly. Once we have Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom too. We can't risk her getting suspicious. The color drained from both daughters' faces as they heard their own voices, confessing to murder and conspiracy. How did you? Rebecca stammered. Your father suspected you, I said coldly. Weeks, Before you murdered him, he knew something was wrong. He hired a private investigator. He documented everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every payment to Russo. We have it all on tape. But Dad's dead, Sarah said desperately. You identified his body. We buried him. He's... The front door opened. Robert walked in, very much alive, flanked by Detective Morris and two uniformed officers. The reactions were instantaneous and visceral. Sarah screamed and stumbled backward, nearly falling over the coffee table. Rebecca's face went from white to gray, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Marcus ran toward the back door before an officer blocked his path. Dr. Harrison and Linda Chen simply froze, caught between fleeing and staying. "Hello, daughters," Robert said, his voice cold and unfamiliar. "Surprise, I'm still alive." "But you're dead," Rebecca whispered, staring at Robert like he was a ghost. "We buried you. I saw your body in the morgue. You had the ring, the watch, everything. You buried David Chen, a homeless man who died of natural causes," Detective Morris said, stepping forward with handcuffs. "Your father's been in protective custody for the past week, watching every move you made, documenting every crime you committed." "This isn't possible," Marcus said, his voice rising to a shout. "The insurance company confirmed the death. The medical examiner signed off. The police ruled it an accident. You can't just fake a death to catch murderers," Crawford said, entering behind Robert. "Actually, with proper authorization and cooperation from the right people, we can." And we did. Sarah started crying. Real tears this time. Tears of panic and fear rather than performance. "Daddy, please. We didn't mean... It wasn't supposed to." "Wasn't supposed to what?" Robert asked harshly. "Wasn't supposed to actually kill me? You hired Russo to cut my brake lines. You planned for me to die on that highway. The only reason I'm alive is because I suspected you weeks ago and took precautions." "Rebecca Hayes, Sarah Hayes, Marcus Thornton," Detective Morris began, pulling out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, elder abuse, theft, and a list of other charges that will be formally read at the station. You have the right to remain silent." Rebecca lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage. "This is your fault. You put him up to this. You turned him against us." Two officers restrained her before she could reach me. "Mrs. Hayes, I'd advise you to stay calm," one of them said. "Calm?" Rebecca screamed. "That bitch poisoned our father's mind. We were trying to help them, and she made him think we were criminals." "You are criminals," Robert said quietly. "You conspired to murder me. You stole from your mother. You were planning to have her declared incompetent and institutionalize her against her will. Those aren't accusations or misunderstandings. Those are facts, documented with recordings and video evidence." Sarah had collapsed on the floor, sobbing hysterically. We needed the money. Marcus's business was failing. We were going to lose everything. We just needed... "You needed your father dead," I finished for her. "You needed me out of the way so you could steal everything we'd worked our entire lives to build. Don't pretend this was anything other than greed and murder." Dr. Harrison was edging toward the door when an officer stopped him. "Dr. Harrison, you're also being detained for questioning regarding falsifying medical evaluations and participating in a conspiracy to defraud." "I was just doing a routine evaluation," Dr. Harrison protested. "I didn't know anything about murder." But you knew you were fabricating evidence of cognitive decline, Detective Morris said. You participated in a scheme to have Mrs. Wilson declared incompetent when you knew she was mentally sound. That's fraud and elder abuse. Linda Chen, the lawyer, had her phone out, already calling someone, probably her own lawyer. I was providing legal services to clients. I had no knowledge of any criminal activity. We'll let a judge decide that, Morris replied. As the officers handcuffed my daughters, Rebecca turned to look at me one final time. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. I hope you're happy, Mother. You just destroyed your own family. You destroyed this family the moment you decided money was more important than human life, I replied. I didn't put you in handcuffs. You put yourself there with your choices. Sarah was still crying, being led out by a female officer. Mommy, please, please don't let them take me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But her tears didn't move me. She'd called me Mommy, a name she hadn't used since childhood, as a manipulation tactic, hoping to trigger my maternal instinct. It didn't work. I'd seen too much, knew too much about what she'd done and what she'd been willing to do. Marcus went quietly, his face blank with shock. His entire world had collapsed in a matter of minutes. The insurance money he'd been counting on to save his business was gone. His wife was going to prison. His own freedom was in jeopardy. Everything he'd schemed and manipulated for had vanished like smoke. After they were taken away, Robert and I stood in Rebecca's expensive living room, surrounded by the trappings of a life built on debt and desperate greed. Crawford began collecting recording equipment he'd hidden throughout the house days earlier, small cameras and microphones that had captured every incriminating word. Are you okay? Robert asked me, pulling me into his arms. I don't know, I admitted. I just watched my daughters get arrested for trying to murder you. I don't know what I am. We went home to our small apartment, the place Rebecca and Sarah had been so ashamed of, and it felt like sanctuary. These humble rooms had never betrayed us. These worn furnishings had witnessed real love, real sacrifice, real family, not the twisted perversion our daughters had turned those concepts into. The trial was scheduled to begin 2 months later. In the interim, the media descended on Millbrook like locusts. Daughters, plot father's fake death for insurance money, became a national headline. News vans parked outside our apartment. Reporters ambushed us at the grocery store, at the bank leaving church on Sundays. Our phone rang constantly with interview requests. Nancy Grace wanted us on her show. Dateline wanted to do an hour-long special. True crime podcasters wanted exclusive interviews. We declined everything. This wasn't entertainment. This was our lives, our tragedy, our destroyed family. The evidence against Rebecca, Sarah, and Marcus was overwhelming. Crawford had documented everything meticulously: audio recordings, video surveillance, financial records, text messages, emails. Vincent Russo, facing his own murder charges, had agreed to testify against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. Their lawyers tried various defense strategies. They claimed temporary insanity, driven by financial desperation. They argued that Marcus had manipulated Rebecca and Sarah, that my daughters were really victims too. They suggested that Robert and I had entrapped them, that the fake death was an illegal operation that tainted all the evidence. None of it worked. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, I sat in the courtroom watching my daughters, trying to find some trace of the children I'd raised. Sometimes I'd see a flicker of something, remorse, perhaps, or at least regret at being caught. But mostly I saw calculation, strategy, the same cold assessment that had led them to plot Robert's murder in the first place. The prosecution presented their case with devastating precision. They played the recordings of Rebecca and Sarah planning the murder, discussing how to dispose of me afterward, dividing up the money they thought they'd get. They showed the surveillance footage of Russo tampering with Robert's car. They presented financial records showing the theft of our savings, the forged signatures, the falsified medical evaluations. Russo testified, describing in clinical detail how he'd been hired to cut brake lines, how he'd been paid $15,000 in cash, how he'd been assured there would be no investigation, because the accident would look completely natural. Did the defendants know this would result in Robert Wilson's death? The prosecutor asked. That was the whole point, Russo replied. They wanted him dead. They were very clear about that. The defense tried to cross-examine him, to suggest he was lying to save himself, but his testimony was corroborated by too much physical evidence. The recordings proved Rebecca and Sarah knew exactly what they were hiring him to do. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head high. I'd been dreading this moment, knowing I'd have to speak publicly about my daughter's crimes, but I also knew it was necessary. The prosecutor asked me to describe our family history, our relationship with Rebecca and Sarah, the changes we'd noticed as they grew wealthy, and we remained working class. They became ashamed of us, I said simply. They'd achieved financial success, and we were reminders of the poverty they'd escaped. We went from being parents they loved to obstacles standing between them and more money. Did you ever suspect they might harm your husband? Not until Robert hired the private investigator, I admitted. Even then, I didn't want to believe it. They were my daughters. I'd given birth to them, raised them, sacrificed everything for them. The idea that they could murder their own father was incomprehensible. When did you finally accept the truth? When I heard the recordings. When I heard Rebecca say, "Once we have Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom too." That's when I knew my daughters were gone, replaced by strangers who happened to look like them. The defense attorney, a slick man in his 50s, tried to shake my testimony during cross-examination. Mrs. Wilson, isn't it true that you and your husband staged an elaborate hoax? That you used a dead man's body to deceive your daughters? We use legal methods to catch criminals, I replied firmly. Everything we did was authorized and supervised by law enforcement. But you lied to your daughters. You let them believe their father was dead. They were trying to make him dead, I shot back. They hired someone to murder him. We simply caught them in the act of their crime. Didn't you consider that this might have been a misunderstanding? That perhaps your daughters were genuinely concerned about your welfare? I looked directly at Rebecca and Sarah in the defendants' chairs. Genuinely concerned, people don't hire hitmen. They don't cut brake lines. They don't steal their parents' life savings. They don't plan to institutionalize their mothers against their will. That's not concern. That's calculated evil. The courtroom was silent. When Robert testified, he was calm and factual, walking the jury through every step of his investigation. He explained how he'd first become suspicious, how he'd hired Crawford, how they documented the conspiracy as it unfolded. At any point, did you consider confronting your daughters directly? The prosecutor asked. No, Robert said. Because if they were innocent, if I was wrong, accusing them would destroy our relationship forever. And if I was right, if they really were planning to kill me, confronting them would only make them more careful, harder to catch. The only way to know the truth and stop them was to document everything and let them act. How did you feel listening to your daughters plan your murder? Robert's voice cracked for the first time. Like my heart was being ripped out. These were my little girls. I taught them to ride bikes. I walked them to school. I stayed up with them when they were sick. And they were discussing my death like it was a business transaction, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a human being, their father, who loved them. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor played the full recording of Rebecca and Sarah's conversation in Rebecca's car, the one where they discussed dividing up the money after both Robert and I were dead. Sarah's voice filled the courtroom. What if Mom doesn't cooperate? What if she refuses to sign over the assets? Rebecca's voice, cold and calculating. Then, we go the suicide route. Widow overcome with grief, can't live without her husband, takes too many pills. It happens all the time. No one would question it. A gasp went through the courtroom. Several jurors looked horrified. I saw one woman on the jury wipe tears from her eyes. The prosecutor paused the recording. For the record, Rebecca Hayes is discussing murdering her own mother and making it look like suicide. Is that correct, Mrs. Wilson? Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the pain. My daughters were planning to kill me too, once they'd gotten everything they could from me. Rebecca's lawyer objected, arguing the recording was taken out of context, but the judge overruled. The context was clear. My daughters had planned not one murder, but two. The defense tried to present Rebecca and Sarah as victims in their own way, victims of societal pressure, of Marcus's manipulation, of financial desperation. They brought character witnesses who testified about what good people my daughters had been before all this, what devoted employees, what generous friends. But none of it mattered. The recordings didn't lie. The evidence didn't lie. Vincent Russo's testimony didn't lie. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. In the case of the state versus Rebecca Hayes on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder? Guilty. On the charge of elder abuse? Guilty. The list went on. Guilty on all counts. The same for Sarah. The same for Marcus, though he faced additional charges related to his role as the organizer and financier of the plot. When the judge asked if anyone wanted to make a statement before sentencing, Rebecca stood. She looked directly at Robert and me, her expression unreadable. I want to say that none of this was personal, she began. We weren't trying to hurt you. We were just trying to solve our financial problems. If there had been any other way, there were 1,000 other ways. The judge interrupted. You could have asked your parents for help. You could have declared bankruptcy. You could have cut back on your lifestyle. You could have made any number of legal, ethical choices. Instead, you chose murder. You chose to value money over your father's life, over your mother's well-being, over basic human decency. Rebecca sat down. Her moment of attempted justification cut short. Sarah also stood, crying. I'm sorry, she said, looking at us. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I felt nothing. Her apology was too late, too hollow, too obviously motivated by her impending sentence rather than genuine remorse. The judge sentenced Rebecca to 25 years in prison, without possibility of parole for 15 years. Sarah received 20 years, with parole possible after 12. Marcus, as the primary conspirator and the one who had recruited Russo, received 30 years with parole possible after 20. As they were led away in shackles, Rebecca turned one last time. "This is your fault," she mouthed to me. "You destroyed our family." But she was wrong. She had destroyed our family the moment she decided her father's life was worth less than his insurance payout. The months following the trial were strange. Robert and I had to rebuild our lives, figure out who we were in the aftermath of such profound betrayal. We sold our apartment. The memories there had become too painful, and moved to a small cottage near the coast, about an hour from Millbrook. The cottage was modest, just 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen, but it had a view of the ocean and a sense of peace our old apartment no longer held. We furnished it simply, with pieces from thrift stores and garage sales, just like we'd done as newlyweds. In a strange way, we were starting over, building a new life from the ruins of our old one. With the life insurance money that Rebecca and Sarah had tried to steal, the policy Robert had increased at their insistence, we established the Second Chance Foundation. It was dedicated to helping families dealing with elder abuse and financial exploitation by relatives. James Crawford came to work for us full-time, heading our investigation division. He trained a team of private investigators who work with families who suspect their own children or relatives of financial crimes. In the 3 years since we started the foundation, we've helped over 300 families, prevented dozens of murders and exploitation schemes, and sent more than 50 criminals to prison. Every case hits close to home. Every desperate elderly person who calls our hotline could be us. Every greedy adult child we help catch could be Rebecca or Sarah. We're turning our tragedy into something meaningful, saving the lives of parents who, like Robert, sensed something wrong but didn't know how to prove it. We also work with law enforcement agencies nationwide, training them to recognize signs of elder abuse, to take seriously suspicions that seem crazy or paranoid. Robert's fake death has become a case study in major crimes courses, an example of how creative police work can catch criminals who think they're too smart to get caught. The media attention eventually faded. We're no longer news. We're just an elderly couple living quietly in a cottage by the sea, working to help others, trying to make peace with what happened to our family. I receive letters from Rebecca occasionally. They come from Lakewood Correctional Facility for Women, written on prison stationery, with Rebecca's familiar handwriting. The first few were angry, blaming me for turning Robert against her, for ruining her life, for being vindictive and cruel. I didn't respond to those. The more recent letters have been different, more reflective. Rebecca writes about prison therapy, about slowly coming to understand the magnitude of what she did, about guilt that wakes her up at night in cold sweats. "I dream about the accident," she wrote in her most recent letter. "Except in my dreams, it's not David Chen in the car. It's actually Dad. And I'm standing on the roadside watching him die. And I can't stop it, because I'm the one who made it happen. I wake up screaming. The guards have gotten used to it." She claims she's changing, growing, becoming someone different from the woman who hired a hitman to murder her father. She says prison has stripped away all the superficial things she thought mattered: the money, the status, the expensive clothes and cars, and forced her to confront who she really is. "I was a monster," she wrote. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect Dad to ever speak to me again. I just want you to know that I see it now. I understand, and I'm sorry." I keep these letters in a box in my closet. I don't respond to them, but I don't throw them away either. Maybe someday I'll feel something reading them besides numbness and sadness. Maybe someday her remorse will feel genuine enough to acknowledge. But not yet. Sarah's letters are shorter, less philosophical. She writes about the mundane details of prison life, the food, the other inmates, the program she's enrolled in. She rarely mentions what she did, why she's there. It's as if acknowledging her crime makes it too real, too unbearable. "I miss you, Mom," she wrote last month. "I miss our talks. I miss your cooking. I miss feeling like I had a family." "You had a family," I wanted to write back. "You had parents who loved you unconditionally. You destroyed that family yourself when you chose to murder Dad and institutionalize me." But I didn't write back. What would be the point? Marcus doesn't write at all. According to news reports, he's filed for divorce from Rebecca, trying to distance himself from the crime, even though he was its primary architect. His family has disowned him. His business partners have sued him. He's serving his 30-year sentence in isolation, having been attacked twice by other inmates who don't take kindly to people who murder their own family members for money. Robert and I celebrated our 48th wedding anniversary last month. We went to the same small Italian restaurant where he proposed all those years ago, now under new management, but still serving the same pasta dishes we'd ordered on our first date. "Do you regret it?" I asked him over tiramisu. "The investigation, the fake death, sending our daughters to prison?" Robert thought for a long moment before answering. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that our daughters became people capable of murder. But I don't regret stopping them. If we hadn't, I'd be dead. You'd probably be dead or locked in some facility. And they'd have moved on to their next victim, because people who kill once rarely stop." He's right. Vincent Russo, during his own trial, revealed that Rebecca and Sarah had asked him about other opportunities if this went well. They were already thinking about their next murder-for-hire scheme, possibly targeting Marcus's parents, who had money and were in poor health. We saved lives by exposing our daughters. We just wish those lives hadn't needed saving in the first place. The foundation keeps us busy. We answer calls from desperate elderly people who are noticing strange changes in their bank accounts, adult children who are suddenly very interested in their life insurance, relatives who pressure them to sign documents they don't understand. Last month, a woman named Patricia called us. Her son had been pressuring her to sell her house, to increase her life insurance, to give him power of attorney. The warning signs were identical to what we'd experienced. Crawford investigated. Within 2 weeks, he'd uncovered a plot nearly identical to what Rebecca and Sarah had planned. Patricia's son had credit card debt of $60,000 and was planning to stage her death to look like a fall down the stairs. We helped her get evidence, work with police, and her son was arrested before he could act. Patricia calls us every Sunday now to thank us, to tell us we saved her life. "If you hadn't gone through what you did," she said recently, "if you hadn't had the courage to expose your own daughters, I'd be dead right now. My son would have gotten away with it." Those are the moments that make our work meaningful. Those are the moments when Rebecca and Sarah's betrayal transforms into purpose. We've also become advocates for legal reform. We work with state legislators to close loopholes that make elder financial abuse difficult to prosecute. We push for mandatory reporting requirements, for better oversight of power of attorney arrangements, for resources to help elderly people who suspect they're being exploited. It's slow work. Legal change always is. But we've seen progress in several states. Laws named after victims of elder abuse. Laws that might have protected us if they'd existed when Rebecca and Sarah started their planning. Robert is 73 now. I'm 71. We're both in good health, probably because the stress of pretending to trust our murderous daughters is gone. We walk on the beach every morning, holding hands like newlyweds. We volunteer at a local senior center, teaching other elderly people to recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation. We have friends now, real friends, chosen family who care about us for who we are, not what we have. Our neighbor Dorothy brings us soup when we're sick. Our friend Frank from church helps Robert with home repairs. We have a book club, a bridge group, people who call just to chat, not to ask about our assets. This is what family should be. This is what love looks like when it's not corrupted by greed. Sometimes I think about the future, about what happens when Rebecca and Sarah get out of prison. Rebecca in 12 more years, Sarah in 9. They'll be in their 50s, their lives essentially over, their careers destroyed, their reputations ruined. Will they try to contact us? Will they expect some kind of relationship? Some path to redemption? I don't know. I don't think about it too much. We'll deal with that if and when it happens. What I do know is this: family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by love, by loyalty, by mutual care, and respect. The people who love you don't hire hitmen to kill you. They don't steal your savings. They don't plan to institutionalize you against your will. Rebecca and Sarah are biologically our daughters, but they're not our family anymore. They gave up that right when they chose murder over love. Our family now is the people at the foundation, the families we've helped, the friends we've made, the community we've built around us. Our family is Dorothy with her soup, Frank with his toolbox, the Thursday night bridge group, the Sunday morning church potluck. Our family is the elderly man who called our hotline last week, suspicious of his nephew's sudden interest in his finances. Our family is the woman we helped escape her daughter's financial control. Our family is every person who learns our story and decides to be vigilant, to question suspicious behavior, to value human life over inheritance. 5 years have passed since that October morning when I received the text at Robert's fake funeral. I am still alive. Trust no one. Those words changed everything. They shattered my illusions about my daughters. They exposed a murder plot. They led to justice. But more than that, they taught me that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about choosing who you become after betrayal, after evil tries to destroy you. It's about turning pain into purpose, tragedy into advocacy, loss into legacy. Robert and I wake up every morning grateful for another day together, another chance to help someone, another sunset to watch from our porch. We survived our daughter's attempt to murder us. We exposed their conspiracy. We built something good from the rubble of our shattered family. That's our legacy now. Not the daughters who betrayed us, but the hundreds of families who are safer because we refused to stay silent, because we chose truth over comfortable lies, because we proved that love, real love, is stronger than greed. At my husband's funeral, I got a message that said, "I am still alive. Trust no one." That message saved my life. It exposed a conspiracy. It led to justice. But it also gave me something else, the knowledge that I am stronger than I ever knew, that I can survive betrayal by the people I love most, that I can rebuild my life, even after everything falls apart. Rebecca and Sarah took many things from us. They took our innocence, our trust, our belief in unconditional family love. But they didn't take our dignity. They didn't take our purpose. And they didn't take our ability to love. We just learned to be more careful about who we give that love to. On quiet nights, when Robert and I sit on our porch watching the ocean, I sometimes wonder what our lives would look like if Rebecca and Sarah had been different people, if they'd valued family over money, if they'd loved us for who we were, rather than resenting us for what we didn't have. We'd probably still be in that old apartment in Millbrook. Robert would still be working at the factory. I'd still be clipping coupons and sewing our clothes. We'd have grandchildren by now, little voices calling us Grandma and Grandpa, family dinners on Sundays, holidays filled with laughter instead of emptiness. But that's not the life we got. We got betrayal and murder conspiracies and courtroom testimony against our own children. We got the life where love wasn't enough, where sacrifice meant nothing, where blood ties dissolved in the acid of greed. So we built a different life, a better life in some ways, a life with purpose and meaning beyond just surviving, a life where our pain serves others, where our tragedy prevents similar tragedies, where our survival story gives hope to people facing their own family betrayals. Robert reaches over and takes my hand as we watch the sunset over the water. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. "Everything," I reply. "Nothing. How lucky I am that your fake death worked, that you're actually here with me." "I'll always be here with you," Robert says. "That's what marriage means. For better or worse, remember?" We've certainly lived through the worse. The betrayal, the conspiracy, the trial, the loss of our daughters. But we've also found the better, a renewed commitment to each other, a purpose larger than ourselves, a community that chose us as much as we chose them. Did you connect with Margaret's story? Have you or someone you know experienced family betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support through likes and subscriptions helps me bring more true stories of survival and justice to this community. And if this story resonated with you, consider sending a super thanks. It helps me continue creating content that matters, that makes a difference, that gives voice to people who thought no one would believe them. Thank you for listening to Margaret and Robert's story. Thank you for being part of this community. Together, we shine light on the stories that need to be told, the truths that need to be spoken, the justice that needs to be served. I'll see you in the next one.